Hello and welcome to the Omnex PlanTech webinar, Implementing AS9145 Challenges and Benefits. Today's presenter is Craig Thompson. Craig Thompson is the GM of Omnex PlanTech. Craig is the General Manager and he has extensive quality management, process improvement, lean manufacturing, Six Sigma problem-solving experience. Craig has also authored many articles, white papers, and done many webinars for Omnex. He has a broad understanding of aerospace, oil and gas, automotive, medical devices, and general manufacturing. He holds certifications for Certified Quality Manager, Certified Quality Engineer, Certified Quality Auditor, and is an RAB QSA Certified AS9100 ISO 9000 lead auditor for aerospace. During this webinar, if you have any questions for Craig, please enter them in the Q&A box, which is located in the Zoom webinar panel. There are a number of polls during this webinar, so please be aware of your screen as the polls pop up. Answer them as quickly as you can, and we will move on with the webinar. All right, Craig, you can take it away.
Thank you, Miles. And good morning, everybody. I appreciate everybody being here, taking time. We are going to talk about implementing 9145 and some of the challenges that have come up, some of the benefits that you can see, and a little bit about what AS9145 is, and just a small portion. So I appreciate you folks being here today and giving us your time. So just a little bit about Omnex. For those that don't know, you may or may not have ever had a class from Omnex or even heard of us. We are headquartered out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I currently live in Houston, Texas. So, you know, where the weather's a little better in the wintertime. So that part's good. We have been doing, with Omnex, we've been doing training and implementation and coaching for over 30 years. Probably closer to 40. We have 70 or 700 employees across the globe. I believe we've done classes in about 30 different countries, about 15 to 20 different languages. So you can kind of see some of the things that we work on here at Omnex. This is just a little bit of where we are globally, some of our regional offices and some of our other locations around the world. These are our 6 main targets. And if you look at these, pretty much covers every kind of manufacturing you can think of, right? Automotive, aerospace, electrical, autonomous vehicles, semiconductors, medical device, as well as general manufacturing. So we pretty much run the gauntlet of all manufacturing environments that are out there. This is just kind of some of the services of Omnex as a whole, right? We do a lot of training and certification of personnel. We do a lot of implementation and coaching as well. We also do a lot of assessments and audits, gap analysis, diagnostics of your quality systems, your environmental systems, your health and safety systems. We also can do product certification. We also create software as well, different software packages for a variety of different things. Some of those we'll talk about a little bit as we go through today as well. Like Miles said, I'm the general manager for Omnex PlanTech. These are the things we focus on within PlanTech. We have auditing services, supply chain management services. We also do Apqp solutions, which is where AS9145 fits in. And then we also handle staffing needs and concerns within the industry. And this goes across the board, regardless of the industry type or manufacturing environment that you have. We also have developed Ppap Reviewer, which utilizes AI, what's called, we call them OBOT. This reads through your Ppap package, and it can give you right away, very quickly, does the package meet all the requirements? Does it have, all the T's crossed, all the I's dotted? Does it match our balloon drawing? All the different aspects of Ppap, it can review those rather quickly and give you a report so you know exactly what you need to fix. I'm not going to spend too much time on me. Miles went into that quite a bit. Again, I live here in Houston, Texas. I was a quality manager and a quality director for over 20 years within aerospace and general manufacturing. I've been in every kind of manufacturing environment you can think of, from sheet metal to textiles, bonding, machine shops, complex machining, pretty much everything you can think of. So very well-rounded, I guess you would say, right? Besides being over quality, I was usually over health and safety, environmental, as well as any kind of advanced product quality planning up front as well. So jumping right into it today, there are quite a few challenges, but also quite a few benefits. And so for those that don't know a little bit about AS9145, it is the aerospace standard for Apqp and Ppap. Apqp stands for Advanced Product Quality Planning, and Ppap is the production part approval process. If you don't know, the standard is also a really good tool for addressing risks and opportunities, which is a requirement in AS9100 that you have to address risks and opportunities throughout your entire organization. AS9145 is a good way to do that, both on the product and on the process side, especially out on your shop floor. Right? If you can successfully implement AS9145, which it's pretty much here to stay. I know they've talked about it over the last 20 years. It's been on again, off again type of situation for Apqp, but it's here to stay, right? But if you implement it correctly, you will be able to show any auditor, regardless of who it is, right? Whether it's your customer, third party, NADCAP, whoever it might be, all the objective evidence for Clause 8 and portions of 7, 9, and 10 as well. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as we go through, as far as some of the benefits go. Another benefit is you can flow this down through your supply chain and help them make sure they're delivering you good parts on time every time. We all have struggled with suppliers in the past. We all know every organization has those few suppliers that you're like, if we could just get them over the hump, we would be good. So that being said, excuse me, there are some difficulties and some pitfalls, some struggles that people have encountered that have already implemented AS9145. And that's kind of the stuff we're going to talk about today. What I've seen so far in helping companies implement, as well as doing training across the globe on AS9145, is just some of the things I've seen that have gone good. Some of the things I've seen that have gone poorly is a good word. But some of the benefits you see is in the cost reduction, increasing the throughput in your production, better resource utilization across the board. Putting more of those controls in place helps you have more control over your entire process. And it really helps drive your business continuity or your strategic direction. Okay. So this first one is the first poll coming up, and it should pop up on your screen. Are you planning to implement AS9145 during 2022? All right. Okay. So it's kind of, this is exactly how I was thinking it was going to be, right? It's about half and half as far as those that have already made a decision, but there's quite a few that haven't decided yet. So hopefully for those that are undecided, hopefully today's webinar will shed a little light on why you should, I guess. Doesn't have to be this year, but why you should probably look at implementing this sooner rather than later, right? Okay. So a little bit about AS9145 up front. You'll notice I have a quote up there. The cost of preventing mistakes is generally much less than the cost of correcting them. Those that have been in aerospace for a while or any kind of manufacturing, we all know it costs quite a bit of money to fix the same problems over and over and over again, because we don't always do the best job of fixing the right things, or maybe a risk pops up that we didn't know about. All right. So a couple of things. AS9100, it requires risk-based thinking. Right? That is a requirement. Risk is throughout the AS9100 standard. AS9145 is the standard that helps you make that risk-based thinking a reality. Risks and opportunities are determined and addressed in AS9145. There's no requirement for any of the formal methods, right? Other than AS9145. That's what's driving you to use your DFMEAs, your process FMEAs, to control plans, process flow diagrams, different things like that. It also helps bolster your existing QMS to make it a preventative action tool, right? If you're familiar with AS9100, you'll notice they took they took preventative action out of AS9100 because the QMS is supposed to be a preventative action tool. AS9145 helps make that even a better preventative action tool. Okay. And if you remember back to AS9100, clause 8.11 specifically talks about operational risk. AS9145 for Apqp is that perfect tool to identify those risks. Right? It helps with product design, customer requirements, process design, product delivery. So AS9145, aerospace requirements for advanced product quality planning and production part approval process. There are 5 phases, right? Just like normal Apqp, if you've came from automotive or if you're familiar. There's also 48 different defining activities that you have to do. And some of those activities have some key deliverables. Phase 1 is all about planning, getting all of those customer requirements in, figuring out what the product is supposed to look like, what's it supposed to feel like, how's it supposed to function, all those requirements from the customer, what they need. Phase 2 is about designing that product to meet all of those requirements. Phase 3 is about designing the process to make that product, to make it as quickly as possible, right the first time, and as low a cost as you can. Phase 4, that's validating the product and the process, right? Does the product function like it's supposed to? Does it meet all the drawing requirements? That's part of your phase 4. And then phase 5 goes into full launch into production. You do your corrective actions, your continuous improvement cycle, those actions. Okay. So the applicability for AS9145, new product development, maybe products you're currently making, but you want to make some changes to. Maybe you're making some parts and you have a new customer that's going to use that product in a completely different environment. Right? So those are the 3 different really ways it can be applied. Right? It is not really set up to be applicable to commercial off-the-shelf items. Right? It's also set up so to flow it down to your suppliers. And you are the one responsible, your organization is responsible for flowing it down to your own suppliers. Even if it's a source-directed supplier on a drawing, right? Just like AS9100, you're responsible for how that supplier performs. You're still responsible to flow AS9145 down if it needs to be, or maybe you determine it needs to be in your organization. So you'll notice the 5 phases of AS9145, right? That's the 5 phases we talked about: planning, product design, process design, validation and verification, and then production. So what I did is I took the AS9100 clauses and where they fit into those 5 phases. So you'll notice all of clause 8 is covered somewhere. You also have clause 7.5 for document information. You have clause 9.1 for monitoring and measuring. Clause 10.2 for non-conformity and corrective actions, right? And also 10.3 for continual improvement. So you'll notice there's quite a few different places of the standard that AS9145 helps you gain objective evidence for, right? And that brings us to the next poll, right? Have you already begun to implement AS9145? And I know for some of you that are undecided, probably not, but okay. So the majority say no, which I completely understand, right? Especially since we had so many that were undecided before, right? But what I want to show you is the next slide. All these things down here in red are items that probably a good 99% of aerospace companies are already doing, right? We're already doing contract review, feasibility, can we actually make the parts? Getting customer requirements, bill of materials, test plans, drawings, key characteristics, measurement results, right? Gauge R&R studies, functional testing, right? Packaging and shipping documents. We all live by, supplier quality manuals. We all do AS9102 first articles, right? So if you'll notice, most of those things in red, aerospace companies are already doing. The ones that are in bold with the star are required by AS9145. So a lot of the stuff in AS9145, most aerospace companies are already doing. It's just scattered throughout the organization. There's no boundaries to it, right? It's not all put in one central location. But for the most part, aerospace companies are already doing it. A lot of them just don't realize, oh yeah, hey, we're already doing that. I'll do a lot of AS9145 training, and I'll have organizations there and they're like, oh yeah, well, we do that. It's just a matter of putting some structure behind it and some organization behind it and to capture it all, right? So I know a lot of you said you're not really implementing, which is probably true, but you're already halfway there. Is the good thing, right? Right. So some of the benefits, right? You notice I have another quote. The benefits of knowledge can only be realized in practice. Right? So what are some of the benefits? One of the biggest benefits that you get from AS9145 is the reduction in the cost that's associated with changing products or making drawing changes, right? So an estimated 80% of the costs of the product are locked in at the design stage, right? So every time you have to make a change, the farther down the road you are, the more that's going to cost you, right? So if you have an industry average of almost $16,000 per change, you make a change to the product while it's still in the design phase, right? Before your design freeze, that's all it's going to cost you. You make one after testing, for instance, it might cost you 10 times that amount because there's a lot. You might have to redo tooling. There's a lot of hours involved, those types of activities. If you make one after it goes to production and you've been building it, right, and you don't have any new customers, but you found out after the first couple of shipments, hey, we have some serious design things we need to change, it might cost you 100 times that. Okay, so what AS9145 and the product design process and the process design process give you is that avenue to identify issues and make changes closer to the front. Okay. Another one of the benefits is that AS9145 follows the plan, do, check, act cycle. Right? So one of the other big benefits is it really helps you improve your QMS. Right? So you'll notice it's kind of the same slide I showed before, the different phases and what AS9100 clauses fit in which phase. But you'll also notice I can tie that in exactly with the plan, do, check, act cycle and where the different phases fit in with the different parts of PDCA. Okay. And it also ties in planning, and it also ties in management review. Right? So you'll notice from here, you pretty much have all of AS9100 covered and all of AS9145 within the cycle. Right? So that's two of the biggest benefits. We're going to talk a little bit about some more as well. So the payoff. What payoff are you getting for remaining stuck in the point that you're at? And I always like that quote by Julia Cameron there. You know, what payoff are you getting for remaining stuck at this point in your expansion? What are we getting for staying status quo? Right? So another one of the big payoffs from the Apqp process is it helps you design for manufacturing. Right? And the goal of that is to make the manufacturing process as simple and as efficient as the product's functionality will allow. Right? Whether it's material type, whether it's how things fit together, you notice the kind of the picture there, right? They went from one design to a lot. There's a lot less pieces, parts to do the exact same thing. It also helps you have a better design for assembly, right? A lot of you have probably been in design review meetings before, and you've had the production folks in there as well, and they're going, yeah, I understand the design, but how am I supposed to put that together? Right? So it helps make a better design for assembly, right? Help the assembler perform their job in the most productive manner possible to get good parts out every time. Okay. So the picture here is from during World War II, right? They got it to a point where they could produce one plane off the line every 63 minutes, right? They were running 24/7, but they got to the point where they were doing it that well because they had designed things to be assembled a little easier. So they could produce 650 of those in a month, all the way through. All right. So if you're thinking about doing Apqp implementation, or you've already started, right? Maybe some of you have already started. I've done quite a few training classes already late last year and into this year, where a lot of organizations have already started doing it. A lot of that's because maybe their OEM or their customer has already issued it on a PO saying you will do this, right? Because it is out there, and it's, like I said, it's here to stay. So if you want the best in class implementation, these are some of the things you need to think about. Integrate the product development process with the AS9100 requirement. It also gives you a very structured process with clearly defined tasks, deliverables, and helps you identify the responsibilities. Who's doing what? It also has clearly defined gate reviews, right? When things need to be done, making sure you incorporate the budget into that, your resource utilization. Also helps you with that simultaneously engineering, right? So you're not only are you engineering the product, but you're also starting to engineer the process at the same time for making that product. One of the biggest things that I've seen a lot of organizations where the light bulb moment, for lack of a better word, right, is identifying those key characteristics all the way through. Not only, the design engineers say, hey, all this stuff's important, but a lot of times in manufacturing, what's important or what features are important doesn't always get passed on all the way out to the shop floor. So people are building products not knowing that, hey, I need to make sure on this dimension, because if not, bad things can happen. Right? Those don't always get passed down like they should. Right? Apqp implementations, that's one of the key drivers. It's going to force you to do that. It also helps because leadership can see exactly where things are at right away. And another big, to be best in class, is there are software packages out there. In fact, Omnex makes one, Apqp Manager, that you can put all of your Apqp projects in, all of your documentation in, and when you go to do a new one, you can pick and choose different parts, different processes, different pieces, and build your Apqp without starting from scratch every time. Right? So having one of those software packages is really indispensable as well. Another big benefit, like I said, is having that linkage from all the requirements from the customer all the way down to your work instructions. Okay. What's required? What does it need to do? How does it need to function? How do we need to test it? How do we need to build it? All that information is all linked together, right, in a standardized format. It also helps you manage the risk, which is one of the big things, right? The more you can manage risks, the more controls you can put in place, the less likely things are to go wrong. Right? So you have control plans, you have your gauge control, you have in-process inspection worksheets. All these are tied together. They all are part of your control process for mitigating risk. Right? And that brings us to another poll. And it's kind of just yes or no. Are you interested in more information or training on AS9145 implementation? Okay. All right. That part's good. Most people are. Like I said, it's here to stay. So gaining that information now is really going to help. Right. And also, what we're going to talk about next is some implementation pains, right? Some lessons learned, things that I've seen that have not gone so well, right? And not just me, other people have seen it and made comments to me and stuff, so I've included those. But there's another quote up here by Thomas Edison: "Every failure is a lesson learned about your strategy," which is true, especially manufacturing, right? If we could always take something out of what went wrong and do a good job of that, the better off we're going to be, right? So initially, when you try and roll this out to your organization, or you take this back to your top management, if you're not part of top management, or you are top management, you try to take this back to your organization, you're going to get some initial internal pushback, right? These are just some of the things I know have happened. Right? APQP, the procedures, the forms, they're too time consuming. We all said the same thing about AS9100 first articles, right? And having the 3 forms. When that first came out, there was a huge uproar within aerospace. Now we're to the point where we all do them. We all know what they are. It's not as big of, once we got into it, we realized, okay, it's not as big a mountain to climb as what we thought. Right? APQP is the same way. It looks daunting at the first, but it's not as bad. Right? So, second, we don't understand how to do a feasibility study. That part's probably true. Not a lot of organizations have done feasibility studies in the past, or even capability studies. Right? But if you get some training, you go to some of these webinars, you go to classes, it's also, again, not as daunting as you might think. Right? This is one I've heard a lot. Manufacturing and quality, they don't need to be part of the quote process. Right? Even though inspection and manufacturing are the 2 most time-consuming parts to building products, a lot of times they're not included. Another pushback, we don't have the additional resources to do APQP. And we don't have people that we can have do it, right? Well, it's not just one person that does it. All of your APQP projects should be a cross-functional team anyway. And I already showed you on the other slide, right? We had that example. A lot of the things in APQP you're already doing. Most aerospace companies are, right? Another good one, and I was guilty of this as well, going to a lot of design review meetings. Quality, production, and purchasing, they ask too many questions. I was guilty of that a lot. I asked a lot of questions in design meetings coming from the quality world. Another big one, we don't understand the interfaces or the sequences, how the different tools flow together, from design Fmea to process flow diagram, Pfmea, control plans. We don't understand how they flow together. It's really just a training thing. Another big one, if we flow this down to our suppliers, they're going to want to charge us for it, right? Or can we charge this back to the customer? It's the same. We all had the same argument when AS9100 came out, right? And most of the customers said, no, you're not charging us for it. You're going to just do it. Right? So, that is going to be a pushback. And then, the biggest one is, hey, that's going to take too long. We told the customer we would ship this next month. If we do an APQP project, we're looking at 3 or 4 months. That's not always the case, but it is one of the pushbacks you're going to see. So, some lessons learned, right? One of the big things with APQP is having those specific suppliers involved in your APQP, right? Maybe right now there a lot of organizations are only involved in the Ppap side, the documentation package. But if a supplier controls one of your key characteristics, like heat treat, for example, they need to be involved, because you need to know what their process is for making sure that they're going to give you the right heat treat every time. A lot of organizations that have been doing this or started doing this, they don't use a quality of event checklist. In other words, they're not keeping track of things they found out. They haven't kept track of lessons learned while they've been doing it. The other one is no champion. Who's responsible, right? Not necessarily who's going to do it all, right? It's not one person that does it all, but who drives the process to keep things moving, to have the meetings, to make sure people are doing their tasks, things are getting done, the Gantt charts being followed, right? Having that one person, right? Right now, one of the things that I've seen is, since quality is in the title, right? It's a quality function. That's one of the drawbacks. That's one of the biggest lessons learned. Personally, project management is probably the best choice because that's what they are used to doing. That's their job. They handle projects, right? Most companies that have kind of transferred over to that have had a better success, but not relying on project management only, right? There's more to it than that. The costing of the project, right? That is one of the lessons learned where a lot of organizations will struggle on how to accommodate the different aspects of APQP and be able to put the time and money and resources towards doing the project. Another one of the big lessons learned is the gate reviews haven't been forward looking, right? What's the next phase? What's some of the deliverables we got to have? What's some of the deliverables we got to finish now for the next phase to be able to do their job? Okay. Another lesson is a lot of organizations do a fairly good job of risk analysis, identifying the risks, but not necessarily a good strategy on how to mitigate those risks, right? Or maybe the risks weren't even identified at all. Okay. And one of the biggest ones I've seen so far is the APQP reviews at the different phases or the meetings end up being a meeting just to plan another meeting, which does not help your process, right? So these are some of the lessons that I've seen so far. Just a few. There's a lot more, but some of them are more specific to different organizations, right? But there are some challenges, right, as well. Like I said, in the past, APQP has always been perceived as a quality function because quality is in the title, you know, advanced product quality planning. Therefore, quality owns it. So, manufacturing and program management aren't normally involved up front, right? Especially on the product development process. Even though it would help you design, you know, if manufacturing is involved, you have a better shot at designing for manufacturing or designing for assembly, like we talked about before. One of the other challenges is not having the training to understand how all the tools are linked together, right? From DFMEA all the way to control plans. Another challenge is not doing a very good job of the risks that suppliers impose on your products. Like I said, if they control a key characteristic like heat treat, making sure they have the processes in place and the controls in place, that's part of that risk assessment. A lot of times APQP reviews are only perceived as design reviews, right? Which that's not what it is. They are specific to, you know, different pieces of the design or different pieces of the process. Right? So you're reviewing that, not just, yep, the design review looks good, drawing looks good, everything's spelt right. Yeah, you got all the dimensions on there. Go ahead and send it on. Yeah. Another challenge is making sure everybody on the project team of the different phases is communicating with one another. Right? That communication, the better communication you have in an APQP project, the better off everything will run. Okay? And one of the biggest challenges is personnel try to do the functions or the different phases by themselves and not use a cross-functional team. Right? I don't know everything on the design engineering side. I'm a quality guy, right? I have a drafting degree in machine and tool design. I'm not a design engineer. I don't know material strengths. I don't do stress analysis. You know, I'm not a hydraulic, you know, what is it, a hydraulics guy or electrical guy. I don't know those things a lot. So if I try and do an APQP project by myself, there's a lot of stuff that's going to get missed. Right? You got to use that cross-functional team. The other good thing about cross-functional team really is it gets a lot of that tribal knowledge, right? Everybody's got notes and ideas tucked away, and how to do different things and how they do it easiest and best. Getting that tribal knowledge and getting it documented is a huge benefit, right? So use that cross-functional team, right? So you'll notice these are some key characteristics to successful implementation of AS9145. You know, we've talked about some of the benefits. We've talked about some of the challenges, right? So these are some key characteristics to making sure you are successful. And you have to remember, prevention, one-time expense, right? You got to pay for it up front to prevent it from happening. Most of the time in aerospace, we fall into that detection and correction, right? What's one of the first things we always do when something escapes our facility or a bad part happens? Oh, we're doing 100% inspection. Put somebody on that, inspect every one of them we make, right? And that just keeps happening over and over and over again. Aerospace parts are probably some of the most over-inspected, over-engineered parts on the planet. Now, for a good reason, right? But it's also costs a lot of money. Versus if you could spend money up front and prevent it one time, you know, it's going to save you money in the long run, right? But some keys to success, right? Making sure top management buys into the program and offers that support all the time, right? Using a cross-functional team, right? Multidisciplinary approach, right? Cross-functional team doesn't mean, okay, we have, instead of one design engineer, we're going to have 3. And instead of one quality person, we're going to have 2, and we'll have 1 sales guy in there, right? No, multidisciplinary, quality, purchasing, maintenance, production, engineering, the manufacturing engineering group, design engineering group, right? Multidiscipline, right? Making sure it's a preventative approach. What controls can we put in place to prevent things from happening, rather than what do we have in place to react when it does? Another one is understanding the requirements, right? Understanding AS9145, what's required in it. Making sure risk management, using the FMEAs, whether it's a system of design or a process FMEA. Identifying the key design functions or the critical components or the key characteristics all the way through, from when the requirements come in from the customer all the way till parts go out the door. Everybody understands what's important. And then the last one, preventing the causes of the failure, right? During the product design or the product realization process, right? Preventing them causes from happening to the product or during the process of building it. Yeah. So how Omnex can help, right? Omnex is not only a training company, right? We have developed some of the best in class ways to implement coaching, integrations, as well as software, which I talked a little bit about. There is an Apqp Manager software. And I've had a few companies recently. I do know there are, in the automotive world, there are a few OEMs that are going to start requiring you to have some sort of a software package to handle your Apqp. That has not spilled over to aerospace yet, but it's on the radar, right? But Omnex is also at the forefront of all the latest standards. We're on a lot of the boards and a lot of the committees for the draft standards, different things like that. We also are one of the first organizations to actually do a Ppap software reviewer with AI. So it kind of learns as it goes and you can teach it. We also do a lot of on-site and virtual consulting, training, and implementation across the board. The last couple of weeks, I have been out in California to an aerospace facility doing AS9145 training for a lot of their individuals on design, FMEA, PFMEAs, AS9145 as a whole. So, right. So this is our last poll today. So, and this is a big question. That's why I'm asking. Are you aware of the new AS13100 standard that was developed by the Aerospace Engine Supplier Quality? Basically, all the engine folks got together and created a standard, why we were all hunkered down during 2020, right? So I was just wondering who was aware of it. Okay, so it's about split, right about 50-50 for the folks that answered. Okay, so the next few slides, we're just going to talk about it a little bit, and the reason we're going to do that is because of how important it is, right? So to start with, here's the family of documents, right? You have ISO 9001, that's kind of the governing thing. Then you have AS9100, which took ISO, added some specific aerospace things in bold type at the bottom of each clause. And then you have AS9145, which is also aerospace, specifically for Apqp. Right, both of those were created by IAQG. Now you have AS13100, right, which was created by AESQ, and it's aerospace supplier quality requirements. Now, that being said, here's the reason it's important. AS13100 establishes supplemental requirements for AS9100 and AS9145. Okay, now you would think since the engine group put it out, it was for engine component manufacturers, but the standard actually says it applies to any organization that ends up with 13,100 as part of a PO or a contract or any other requirement from the customer. So any customer can require AS13100. AS13100 is it's not really long standard, but it is a fairly large standard, but it has a lot of additional requirements for both AS9100 and AS9145. And I do know that Boeing has issued it out to some airframe suppliers already, not engine suppliers, as part of a PO, which means then you have to do it because it's part of now it's a customer requirement. Okay. The reason for it was to simplify and standardize some supplier requirements, okay, to build on some existing standards, right? Put some common language out there within the supply chain, right? The problem is it adds a lot of stuff. It is a game changer in the quality world, right? And the reason I bring it up now is because half of the standard is about AS9100 and some supplemental requirements there. The other half is additional requirements for AS9145. One of the things it does is it breaks it down into what organization type you are, right? Are you make to print, design for manufacturer, design only, distributor, special process, raw material? Depending on which organization type you are, some things in the standard apply, some don't. Okay, so I just want everybody to be aware of AS13100. If you have not read it yet, I would say get a copy of it and go through it, especially if you're in the quality world and you're over your QMS. It's a game changer. There's a lot of things in there that are going to make you go, oh boy, right? The first time I read through it, I was like, yeah, I'm glad I'm not a quality manager anymore. So it's one of those kind of standards, right? So just a little bit of a summary to finish up, because I want to make sure we have time for any questions at the end, right? Apqp and Ppap can help you improve your quality, right? It can help you lower your PPM. Maybe you're at 1,000 now. It can actually help you lower it down to 100, putting those controls in place, right, and the disciplines. Right? It also helps establish that discipline to make sure you're your project is handled on time, deliverables are being done and accounted for. All the Apqp tools will help you improve your capability and reduce your risk, and helps you improve your quality. Putting those controls in place, those preventative controls, is a one-time expense rather than adding a bias audit here and there. Again, it's complementary to your existing QMS. It doesn't take the place of your QMS, but it's going to help make your QMS more robust, right? If you haven't already, if people aren't familiar with it, you're going to need some training. Maybe people within your organization on FMEAs, control plans, MSA and SPC especially. Some of the software tools like I talked about are ideal for handling those projects. Making sure your document control tools are linked to your projects, that's indispensable. And the last one, AS13100, it's new, but it's here to stay. It's already been invoked a few times to non-engine suppliers, and it is a game changer, right? So just a few things to finish up, and then we'll get to questions. I see one popped in there. We'll get to those in just a second. So if anybody else has questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A thing, and we will get to anybody's questions. I want to make sure we have time for that. So we have virtual or remote training available, not just on site. The world we live in today, we do a lot of both. So we can do virtual as well for any kind of training, or implementation is kind of, we've done it both ways as well. Right? These are some of the aerospace courses that are coming up that are offered by Omnex. You can see we actually have some for AS13100 as well. And not only AS9145, but we run the gamut on aerospace courses as well. We also have some, for integrated management, taking your QMS with your EH&S and your, those systems and putting them all together into one integrated system. We do auditing training, or lead auditor training, internal auditor training. We also have problem solving and also a lot of risk management courses as well. So with that being said, I appreciate everybody's time, and I'm going to get to questions. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in here even as we're going through them. So the first one, just so everybody knows, is AS13100 only applicable to engine manufacturers and their supply chain? No. It very specifically says in there that it is a requirement anytime it is invoked to any supplier on a PO or a contract. So you might be making parts for Lockheed, and Lockheed issues 13,100 on a requirement on your PO. You're going to have to do all of those requirements. You're probably already AS9100 certified, but you're going to have to worry about the supplemental requirements. It's also it invokes AS9145, so then you're still going to have to do Apqp as well with the supplemental requirements in 13,100. That's why it's sort of such a game changer. Okay, so the next question, so hopefully that answered that. The next one, how often is the FMEA to be initiated or updated? Okay, this is a good question. So your FMEA, especially your process FMEA, should be a living document, right? So your process FMEA and your control plan should be living documents. In other words, anytime you make a corrective action to your process, you change something to your process. A lot of times we do a good job of fixing a problem, but we don't do a good job of updating all the paperwork, right? So when you do a corrective action, you should go back and update your control plan so that it matches, and update your process FMEA so that it matches the changes that you just put in place, right? Because maybe you had a corrective action for a risk you hadn't identified yet, right? So they should be updated as things change. The design FMEA might not change as often, only when you're going to make a design change or a drawing change. But process FMEA and control plan, anytime you do a corrective action that's associated with that process. Okay. Let's see the last one, or another one right here. Will 13,100 replace 9145? No, it will not. It adds supplemental requirements. In fact, one of the requirements just off the top of my head is AS 13100 requires all of your internal auditors to be trained on AS 9145. So there's a lot of internal auditors that are going to have to get some sort of training on AS 9145. Most likely like the one-day overview training that Omnex offers for AS 9145, but they are going to have training on AS 9145 and what the requirements are and what the tools are. So no, it doesn't replace it, it adds supplemental requirements. Another instance for AS 9100, just so you know, off the top of my head, 13100 changes the vision acuity requirements for your inspectors as well. It adds some more stringent vision acuity requirements for inspectors. So yeah, okay. So another one, how could you decide on the occurrence rating? Okay, for those that don't know, your occurrence rating is when you're doing your FMEAs, whether it's design or process, the occurrence rating is how likely or how often is the failure mode going to happen. In other words, how often are things going to go wrong, right? You've identified certain things that can go wrong. How likely or how often will it go wrong? Excuse me. There is within AS9145, it references SAE J1739, which is the standard that has those charts in it for occurrence. So there is actually tables with different columns to help you choose your occurrence rating, as well as your severity and detection ratings as well. So the SAE J1739 standard is where the charts are that help you identify the ratings. All right. So are there any other questions, or did I get them all? Okay. If not, we are right about the top of the hour. I appreciate all of you being here today. Hopefully it was beneficial. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of insight, especially if you were still trying to decide whether to implement it or not. Again, it's here to stay. 13,100 is here to stay as well because it's already been invoked a few times. So, if you're undecided, you might want to watch for it. Make sure that a customer's not sliding it in there somewhere hidden in the T's and C's of your contracts or your POs, because I've seen that a couple of times. Organizations weren't aware that it was a requirement now. But hopefully this is some good information. Again, you can reach out. The email is on there. If you want more information, you can always reach out and ask anybody at Omnex, or you can get a hold of me. My information is the same, only it's C Thompson at Omnex. So feel free to reach out. If you have further questions, maybe, the next few days, you another question pops in your head, feel free to reach out and ask. It's not a problem. I get those a lot, and I love to answer them. So other than that, I appreciate everybody being here, and hopefully we will hear from you down the road and see you at our next webinar. I appreciate everybody, and have a good rest of your day and a good weekend.